What's going on, knuckleheads? Welcome to another episode of Fight Life Tips and Advice. I'm your host, the FightersRep. This is a new series that I'm starting. It's just me. I give you my thoughts on the fight game. I try to relate them to things that are going on in the mainstream right now. And because a lot of the times that's a good way of highlighting what's important in life, what's important in the world, and give you an idea on, how to do things so that disasters like what we saw in Beirut, Lebanon, and in the media right now don't happen to you and your career and your business and your organization. And so this video is entitled Root Out Corruption and Incompetence, and it's in honor of Beirut, Lebanon, FLTA. That's Fight Life Tips and Advice. Thank you for joining me. If you guys don't know this about me, by the way, thank you for joining. I hope you're doing well. I am of Arab descent, and specifically, I have ties to Lebanon. I have ties to Syria, and those people made their way over to different parts of South America before heading into the United States. I'm essentially a first generation here, but maintain the culture, speak Arabic, speak Spanish. Parents grew up there, know a lot and grew up in that culture, grew up in that vibe. And one thing that's consistently pointed out to me, right, is the lack of opportunity, the hard times that these people left back home, and we'll focus on Lebanon for today. And the reason, the reason's manyfold. But the main reason as to what's happened in Lebanon, and I'll tie this into the fight game and your career and your business and everything, but the main reason as to what's happened in Lebanon is essentially two things: corruption and incompetence. I mean, from what I've seen on the news, from what I've heard from my family, from when I went there to visit, from what I saw myself on my visit, I mean, it's readily visible that the corruption there is just incredible. Now, and I'll give you some examples. Apparently, it has the third highest debt to GDP ratio in the world. The third highest debt to GDP ratio. I mean, it's insane, right? Also, it's one of the only countries I can think of where the electricity is on and off and on and off. Like, when I went to visit, they were out. The power was out 4 to 12 hours a day, every day. I don't know what it's like now, but I know it's not good. And you think of other countries, right? I mean, even the poorest countries, even Syria right now, they just, went through a civil war and everything, got family over there, and they've got electricity. Lebanon doesn't have electricity, and the crazy part about it is this is a place that was the jewel, the pearl, the I believe they called it the Switzerland even of the Middle East, right? Mountains, beautiful mountains cascading into the Mediterranean Sea, fertile land. I believe they have gas and oil now that they, recently discovered. Incredible nightlife. Some of the most brilliant people in the world, for example, Carlos Slim, one of the richest men on earth, was the richest man in the world at one point, born in Mexico but of Lebanese descent. An incredible history. I tell people the Bible was named after Byblos, a city in Lebanon. Obviously in biblical times, Lebanon was extremely important. It's just north of where Jesus was born. Just, an incredible history, an incredible place. downtrodden by some of the most unacceptable, sad corruption and incompetence you've ever seen in your life, right? So I gave you the one example of the third highest GDP to debt ratio. The other example is, I believe, something like $40 billion. I believe it's $40 billion has just completely gone unaccounted for in Lebanon. Just completely unaccounted for. Nobody knows where it is. I mean, the politicians that have been ingrained basically into the fabric of the Lebanese, culture, right? The politicians that run the country are just so corrupt that $40 billion is somehow missing. This is $40 billion that should have been dispersed to the people for programs and things like that. But again, no electricity, a dead economy, no opportunity. They're on the heels of a civil war that happened in the 80s. Not really on the heels. I mean, it's been 40 years now, but they should have recovered by now, and instead they're doing horribly. They're doing horribly. And, I will bring up the colonial effect a little bit, because Lebanon was essentially a French colony at some point. Before that, it was essentially part of the Ottoman Empire. So never really had, its own country until, I would say, sometime in the 40s, perhaps, when the French mandate ended. And the system that governs the country was lent or put in place by the French. It was a confessionalist system, and basically in Lebanon you've got all these different religious factions, and that system that was put in place by the French essentially said that, like, a Catholic Maronite has to be president, Sunni Muslim has to be prime minister. It just allocated different positions, kind of, archaically, to people based on their religion. I mean, definitely a bad form of, I guess you can call it some kind of pseudo-affirmative action, but just a horrible thing that's, that kind of evolved into this monster of every single sect wanting to just take as much as it could for its sect. And eventually you had a country in Lebanon, which only has a population of like 3 or 4 million people, become this, like, sort of personification of hungry hippos, right? Where you have all these different factions just eating away at the resources, hollowing the country out from the inside, and just not giving a shit about the people. I mean, just exceedingly sociopathic, no conscience, watching their people starve, watching their people's economy go down the drain, seeing that there's no opportunity, watching the brilliant minds of the Lebanese people escaping into other countries and regions, including Europe, the United States, Africa, Australia, all over the world. There's a huge Lebanese diaspora. In fact, I think there's like 8 or 9 million people of Lebanese descent in Brazil, which is about 3 times the population of Lebanon. It goes to show you how tough the situation is there, and you don't hear a lot about it. But I'm glad, I can kind of educate people on this a little bit. And the saddest thing, right, is that it all comes from this corrupt and increasingly corrupted system. And, from what there's going to be a ton of conspiracy theories as to why the explosion happened and what caused it. But from what I've read and what I believe, is that there was a stockpile, something like 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, a chemical that for whatever reason they confiscated, the government confiscated, and for whatever reason, right, and I'm just going to point to incompetence, right, they stored it on the port near the city center, among civilians, in the capital of the country. Now, apparently, and I don't know this 100%, but it's what I'm hearing. Apparently, this eventually caught fire, right? And again, this is incompetence. I mean, these are government officials placing a highly flammable, highly explosive chemical in what looks to have been a building filled with fireworks, right? Because you could kind of see the fireworks going off before the major explosion happened. Apparently, this thing caught fire. The fireworks started going off, ignited the ammonium nitrate, the 2,700 tons of it, and you saw what you've seen on social media. I mean, an explosion, that was so outrageous. An explosion that was so outrageous that I thought CGI effects were used in the social media posts I was seeing, because the only thing that I can compare it to, considering the mushroom cloud and the sonic boom and everything that you could readily see, was like a small nuclear weapon going off, Just disturbing. And I spoke to friends of mine that are in the military here in the United States, and they told me, man, the only thing I can think of that can make an explosion like that is like a bomb with a huge payload, like a very powerful explosive. So, I'm going to stick, though, if I'm being honest with you guys, with the ammonium nitrate story, because that is something that I could see a completely corrupt and incompetent government that doesn't care about its people, that's robbed its people blind for decades, that's robbed its people of $40 billion plus in aid and whatever, and opportunity and everything else, that doesn't even give its people electricity. I'm going to just put it on incompetence and corruption. And now you're probably asking, how does this fit in to my brand, to my career as a fighter, right? Because that's what this series is about: fight life tips and advice. And it fits in that once you have a little bit of corruption, right? Once you have a little bit of corruption in your system, in your organization, in your team, whatever it is, it starts to fester. It starts to fester. And I believe that this ammonium nitrate that they were talking about was actually sitting in that warehouse on a port in Beirut, the capital city, in the middle of a huge population of civilians. I believe it was sitting there for something like 6 or 7 years. And nobody ever did anything about it. They didn't get rid of it. They didn't store it in a safer area. I mean, there are huge swaths of Lebanon, right, where it's just barren. It's just like fields and mountains. And I mean, they could have put this, excuse me, they could have put this thing anywhere, but they didn't, they didn't. Nobody acted. And almost daily, I talk to my friends in the fight game, and I hear stories of corruption, whether it's, promoters, coaches, teammates, whatever it is. I hear it. I hear it almost every day. In fact, I heard one story today. And it wasn't a teammate. It wasn't a coach. It wasn't a teammate. It was a life partner, let's call it. Let's call it a significant other. And, this significant other was not supporting somebody who, was already presenting, problems. So, I mean, instead of, somebody sitting down with this person that was in the fight game, getting with them, straightening their life out, helping them out, you had this person come in a toxic person come in and affect this person's career in the fight game to the point where, the person's missed out on a huge period of time in the fight game. And, you don't get that time back. You don't get that time back. And this person that I'm talking about, the sad part for me, guys, is I see it all the time, and this shit gets back to me. Even when I don't want to hear about it, right? I don't like to gossip. I don't like to hear about this shit, but it gets back to me. It gets back to me. And this person missed out on so many opportunities because of this toxic person they decided to associate themselves with. And sometimes you gotta grow through it, you gotta learn through it, you gotta take those lumps, but you also have to have the wherewithal to know when someone toxic is coming into your life that you gotta cut them out. You gotta take them out. Some people are not meant for the fight game. Some people are not meant for you. Some people are not meant for your business, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You can't avoid it, unfortunately. At some point, somebody's going to come into your life, and they're going to be a problem. They're going to be a problem. And I would advise that if the person comes in and they're a problem, you give them a chance, and they do it again, or you see that they're causing problems, or you see that they've thrown a sort of monkey wrench into your plans, right? And they're obstructing your plans. Don't sacrifice for this person. Sacrifice the person. Don't sacrifice for the person that's standing in between you and your goals. Sacrifice the person. Don't associate yourself with people that are trouble. And if you hear, because a lot of the times where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So if you hear that somebody's no good, especially in the fight game, all we got is our reputation, and in business. If you hear somebody's no good, don't align yourself with that person without really vetting that person and getting to the bottom of whatever smoke that you smelled, whatever you heard from other people. Get to the bottom of it. Find out why it is that this person told you this about that other person. Verify it. Figure it out. Because you don't want a situation like they've got in Lebanon now, right? Where, 40 years after their civil war, where almost everything was destroyed, 30, 40 years, instead of rebuilding from scratch, taking that opportunity to rebuild from scratch, you kind of brought on a lot of the old heads that caused the problems, or people from their lineage, people with their same mentality, who slowly kind of caused the replay. Because they're not going to change. They're always going to be the same. These destructive people, these toxic people, it's not your job to fix them. It's their job to realize that they need to be fixed. Okay? So don't be like, what happened in Lebanon. If you see this system is corrupt, if you see it's not working, reset, delete, start over. And a prime example of that, I think, is Henry Cejudo, who, after his loss to Demetrius Johnson, he learned his lesson. He reset. He went a different route. He changed everything up. And what I'm saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So if you can keep these individuals, these toxic individuals, out of your life, especially as a fighter, it's going to pay off big time in the long run. But if one does happen to come through and sometimes they slip through the cracks. Man, you need to completely root that person out. You need to root that person out. So anyway, knuckleheads, that's what I kind of wanted to tell you guys about. I see Mo Barazi's in here, YRT. Appreciate you guys joining me. Mo says, do you think it was a munitions warehouse instead of fireworks? I saw a video that looked like ammo popping off. Could have been. It could have been, but whatever it was rooted in incompetence and corruption, my brother. And YRT says the reddish smoke gives the ammonium nitrate away. Definitely not fireworks. Right, what I'm saying is fireworks were also potentially in the warehouse because you see all these little explosions going off before the really big one happened. And I guess that really big one was 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate. And the saddest part about all of this, right, is that this all could have kind of been prevented had they, after that civil war, maybe just appointed a completely different structure of government, kind of decided to, take it into their own hands, whatever system of government they were going to employ, root out all the corruption, bring in an entirely new system with entirely new people. But they kind of picked from a selection of already rotten and festering corrupt individuals that have done nothing but evolved in their corruption to the point where $40 billion have completely been disappeared, stolen from a population that's only about 3 million people. Man, it's the saddest thing. And the worst part about this explosion is this, on top, it's compounding, right? On top of that, all that money that was stolen, the complete lack of economic opportunity, the complete lack of an economy. I mean, the economy's absolutely tanked. They've been doing protests in the streets, telling the government to get out since last year. I believe, even though the population's only a few million, I believe there were hundreds of thousands of people in the street calling for the entire government from top to bottom to just leave, right? Every single last one of them. That's kind of one of their mottos is Killon Yani Killon, which means all of them. Like all of them means all of them is what that saying is. It's all of them means all of them. When we say all of you need to get out, all of them means all of them. All of you need to get out. And despite that, they weren't able to get all these people out, not even close. And then this explosion, man, it's like the proverbial, last straw. You know what I mean? And it's really sad to see. And, yeah, man. Fight Life Nation says, hey, George, do you have family in Beirut? I actually do. I had to reach out, see if they're okay. Thank God they're okay. But, thank God what? I mean, what does that mean? 4,000 plus 5,000 people injured. Over 70-something killed. Properties destroyed. I mean, you see the way that people are just standing outside and amongst the rubble. The country was already in disarray. And the sad part is, so much potential. Again, I mean, if you look at some of the top business people in the world, almost every Lebanese person owns a business, a successful one of some sort, and again, I mentioned the owner of Telmex, I mean, Carlos Slim, hell, even the WBC, right, the WBC, the sanctioning and regulatory body, the green belt that everybody wants, that Muhammad Ali won, the WBC is run by Mauricio Sulaiman, who's, I believe, of Lebanese descent as well, also in Mexico, a lot of Lebanese in Mexico. In fact, if you love Al Pastor tacos, which are my favorite kind of tacos, Al Pastor, apparently Lebanese immigrants, brought that to Mexican culture. And if you look at shawarma, which is, the meat that they eat in the Arab world and in Lebanon, it's exactly the same. I mean, they cook it on on this, this spike. It rotates. The spices drip down or whatever. It's the same thing. So yeah, man. Just a sad situation. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon next to it. Join Knucklehead Nation. I'll do this as much as I can. This fight life tips and advice. Try to kind of lasso it to whatever's going on in the world. Especially in a situation like this, I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about this because I don't think a lot of people know much about Lebanon or the Arab world. And I appreciate you guys joining me, man. If you haven't already, get your FightersRep gear in the link below. Help me continue to build the promotion. Right now during COVID or whatever, it's tough. I can't really put on fights. I'm trying to talk to CSAC and convince them. They do like my ideas. Apparently, they're going to sit down today with their attorneys. I told them I'm here to talk as well. As an attorney, if they want any help, and I'm trying to get it done. So your support at this time means a lot, guys, because obviously we can't sell tickets or do anything. So anything you buy in the links below is appreciated. We have FightersRep masks, shirts, tank tops. We also have the Keep It Clean with Manny stuff, so that's cool too. But anyway, Knuckleheads, that's all I got. Much love to you guys. I'll see you guys very soon. Be sure to tune in Friday for Chris Cully's interview. It's a fantastic one.